welcome and thank you for joining us. Before we start with some of the questions, I would love for you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about your background. And if you want to add just one challenge that you probably faced this year and how you overcame it.
All right, my name is Julia Baker. I started at ServiceTitan about a little over 2 years ago as a director of technical project management. And I'm now starting up a new org called product operations within the company. So in terms of a challenge that we faced this year, one of our big challenges has been kind of our Achilles heel. Our sales pitch as a company and just our value proposition is very personal. We sell software for home services companies like plumbers. And our co-founders founded the company from college, and their dads are plumbers and construction. So it's very personal to us. Our customers are like our family, and each customer that we acquired had a very personal touch, required a team of people to onboard, lots of customizations, and we kind of went that way for a number of years. And now, kind of, that I've been here for 2 years, this doesn't work anymore. We have over 3,000 customers. We want to be a SaaS company, not a services company. And having this kind of personal touch with every customer while still kind of thinking to scale and thinking how we're going to build a SaaS product has been one of our top challenges, I would say, this year and the past couple of years. In terms of how we overcame it, we're still in the process of, we're still working on it, but we definitely worked on the earlier phases of our customer onboarding to make sure it's more cookie cutter, that we had a customer life journey, best practices, and things we do like earlier on when onboarding customers to set these expectations with them. On the product team, we pretty much don't build for one customer as much as we can. We definitely look for problems that are common across our customers or sets of customers. We invested in a service design team who is kind of helping us do that research and find common problems with our customers. And we're continuing to kind of hone in on how to build for all of our customers or a large number of our customers without impacting this kind of very personal value proposition.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Is this working? My name is Patrick. I'm a PM at Airbnb. I've been there for 3.5 years on the guest-facing side. And some of the problems that we're facing as an org now, which has grown quickly, is debt. And I know usually when you talk about debt and you have to make trade-offs as a PM, it's usually new features versus tech debt. But what I'm learning is that there are actually a lot of other kinds of debt, including organizational debt, when you reorg often enough that not every part of the business necessarily fits in somewhere in the new org structure. There's data debt, where you sort of made assumptions early on as a business and might have actually neglected instrumentation and metrics. And now where you are as a company is that you need to pay a lot more attention to data and realize, oh, this decision we made 4 or 5 years ago makes this pretty hard to do. We have feature debt, for example, which is growth features that might have been relevant and important to where we were as a company years ago, but aren't anymore. And we worked on those, but they're not being maintained, and so now we need to figure out a path forward, how to handle. And there are a number of others. Process debt, where you might have some teams which started off as agile MVP type. You have some others which might have been completely waterfall, and at a certain point, you have to make a decision of, do you want the whole company following similar processes? Do you want to encourage teams operating on their own? And so the bigger we've gotten, the more divergence we've seen in that area. And so that's sort of becoming a point that we need to think about a lot more as a business, which is, given the path forward, how can we be most effective as a company?
My name is Samantha. I'm a product director at Tinder, working on the revenue team. I've been there for about 3 years, so seen a lot of growth over that time. One of my biggest challenges right now is that as a millennial, I have had the luxury of being my own target demographic in building my product. And Tinder is our user base, our target user base is really college to early 20-year-olds, which is now not millennials, it's Gen Z, which is a whole new generation, a whole new can of worms. And so for the first time, I'm having to learn what kids these days are doing and how they're interacting on our app, on other app, how their world works, their social views work. So that's been really interesting to kind of relearn and retrain myself, going outside of my own personal experiences to understand kind of this new generation of our user base. I've watched so many TikTok videos in the past year. It's a very new world.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ed from ServiceTitan as well. I'm on the product side. I think one of the bigger challenges we had, I joined only recently in February of this year, and we actually doubled our product management count. So that actually was from a team of about 16 product managers, about 32 in 8 months. So I think you touched on Patrick. I think some of the stuff that you all experience in the product side, it's kind of universal. When you scale a team, just the talent acquisition part is something I think cannot be neglected. And in many ways, I felt like that was our biggest challenge. And the part that I feel very kind of comforted by in terms of like how we overcame that this year is part of the story of ServiceTitan over the last couple of years is you had an amazing, scrappy group of product managers. And as you grow, the thing that you kind of want to avoid is tweaking too much so that you kind of inadvertently break that scrappiness. But at the same time, you need to balance the kind of, I don't want to call it the Wild West, but you do need to bring in a little bit more mature processes in place. And I feel like the way we've acclimated and onboarded the 16 product managers in the last 8 months has been minimally disruptive. And if anything, we've been able to kind of incorporate some of the better ideas and stuff into our thinking and our process. Julia touched on it earlier. It's still a work in progress, but I feel very kind of fortunate in how things have gone so far.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's funny. When we started product school almost 6 years ago when product management wasn't that cool. I promise you that. And now it's kind of old news, right? Like everyone knows what product management is, and it's kind of cool. Now, not only that, but we see how the product team is not just made out of product managers, especially in your cases, you are all unicorn companies, so your product teams are big. And I'm talking about product marketing, product design, project management, and we see kind of a new breed of product function called product ops, right? And Julia, you are the head of ops, the head of product ops. So I would like to learn a little bit more from your perspective. How are you guys thinking about product ops as part of a product team, and how that's different from traditional business ops, if you will? And I would also like to learn from Airbnb and Tinder if you guys have product ops teams, or like, what is this new thing? Is this just a trend, or is this really something that we should start considering as we grow?
Yeah, I'll start. So for us, the product operations, we're kind of inventing this as we go along. There's not a lot of industry models. There's a few, like Uber has one. There's a couple of articles and things out there. For us, I started out as a director of technical project management, which is a role that's more aligned with SDLC and engineering and agile and having Scrum teams. And what I found in that role is that there were a lot of challenges upstream of the SDLC. Like your agile process tells you about how to have a product backlog and how to execute. Well, what about before that? How do you kind of handle the escalations from hundreds of customers and, the loud and screaming one that wants to, get into your product roadmap? A lot of our product managers, by the time I started, we were working in these Scrum teams or squads. They weren't all following Scrum, but there were these squads. The information sharing wasn't happening as frequent, and as I was kind of talking, I would talk to my counterpart in customer success or in sales, and they would say, hey, this product manager did this amazing thing, and how can we get everybody else to do it? Or this person, would come up with some great idea and they would say, oh, well, this person's already doing that. So we kind of were lacking in knowledge sharing and information sharing as quickly as we were growing. And so we came up with product operations as a way to enable and empower our product and engineering organization to have kind of a central command center, a way to share knowledge. We just formed a process improvement guild, which is essentially how members from each squad will share with each other what worked or didn't work, and can also experiment together on hey, I did this thing and I resulted in this many fewer support tickets. Maybe you should try this. And so it's kind of a mechanism for us to enable our product and engineering teams to have a better feedback loop on what decisions did they make and what happened to them, have better structure around how they experiment, what's our alpha look like versus our beta versus going public launch. Helping to kind of define these best practices and processes for our product and engineering team to be more efficient and to also not lose time recreating the wheel. And to have a good set of resources that they can use that could help them spend their time on doing competitive analysis or something more strategic for product development.
Yeah. Thank you.
So we do not have a product ops org, which it sounds really cool though. I kind of wish we did.
It's the hip thing these days.
I mean, seriously, I'm going to go tell work about this now. So I can provide a little bit of perspective on what it's like to not have that level of support. So in our case, the good news is that PMs tend to be very self-managed, and a lot of this operational support and execution-focused work falls onto product managers. So in our case, a lot of teams are relatively self-contained and tend to be pretty effective within themselves. Where this becomes a bit of a challenge is you touched on knowledge sharing, and that's sort of a bit of an issue when you don't have as many cross-functional connectors like what you just described. What we do have is we have technical program management, and we have a function called design program management, which should be pretty obvious what they do. But on the PM side in particular, that tends to fall on the actual product manager themselves. And where that works is if you're within your team, you can move pretty quickly and efficiently and have the luxury of adapting your process to your team's needs. Where it becomes a challenge is for cross-functional and cross-organizational initiatives that would benefit from this type of support, which, unfortunately we don't have.
Yeah, so at Tinder, we also don't have product operations, but it seems like a fantastic function.
It's a hip new thing. You should try it.
I would love to. From my experience, I've seen time and time again teams trying to fix a broken process by adding more process on top of it. And so, for example, trying to solve a lack of communication with more weekly status updates or weekly meetings to the point where you find that you're spending all of your time writing status updates or in meetings rather than actually doing any real work. And so I think that one of the benefits of having a team such as product operations is being able to build a process that's rooted in a strong foundation of something that works, rather than continuously try to put Band-Aids on top of things that don't.
Mm-hmm. So I want to switch gears a little bit and touch upon another topic that's critical for fast-growing companies. And I'm sure you're all familiarized with this Facebook motto of move fast and break things. They actually changed the motto for themselves. Now it's move fast and build infrastructure. And it makes total sense, right? As you're growing, you can't just break things all the time. So I want to learn more about that from your perspective. How do you balance the actual feature building versus infrastructure building in a company that's already at a certain level that can't afford to break that many things at the same time?
Yeah, for us, unlike Facebook, we serve business critical applications. So our customers actually, their livelihoods depend on our software working. So it's never been an option for us. We have a dedicated team. That's one way we deal with it. We have our squad and group PMs who focus on developing more and more features, and we have a platform team that focuses on infrastructure.
So maybe, Ed, do you want
Ed,
to
do you
add
wanna
something,
say?
because I'm not...
Yeah, Julia started talking about it, but we are a mission critical app, so we have to be very sure that anything we roll out cannot fail. Because if you go down for even 15 minutes, the cost to some of these SMB business owners is traumatic. So we have to be super careful about that. And I think going back to the need for the the product operations group. One of the things is we want to make sure that we can have a very fast feedback loop on all things regarding the quality of our product, as well as just even quick learning. I mean, we're all product people here. If you think about the advantage that you've ever had, it's probably rooted in just like how quickly you were able to learn something and course correct as quickly as possible. So I think that is one of the main key reasons for the standing up of this team, because the surface area of our application right now to our customer base who's dependent on us for the livelihood it's very large. And because it's large, you can make more bets. When you were a product manager in the beginning, when I was, it was very easy to kind of go one way, and the penalty was not as great because product market fit was found. You just have to execute fast with the largest customers. We're at the point now where our product, we have 30 product managers. Surface area is tremendous. And because of that, you have to make sure that you learn quickly to know what you should keep doing and what you should stop doing. And again, because of the criticality of the business mission critical app, that feedback loop is just really important to us to make sure we're building the right things for these customers of ours.
So Facebook changed their operating principle, but I want to call out Facebook's a pretty big company and has the luxury of doing this. So the question I would ask is, would they follow that mantra in year 1 or year 2? And so I would actually challenge that. For us, we have started investing a lot more in infra as we have grown. But I want to be clear that I think there are actually a couple of reasons why you want to do that. And I think the one we're talking about a lot is that investing in infrastructure is important to make sure that your product doesn't go down, that it works as expected. But our assumption is that there's a second reason as well, which is to accelerate the productivity and make it easier to ship new product. So robust infra is that foundation on which you can build more product, ideally a lot faster and more safely. So it becomes not just a conversation about uptime and latency and making sure stuff doesn't break, but also that with that investment, you accelerate your team's ability to deliver value to its customers.
Mm-hmm. So another thing that actually I was reading from questions from the audience about product culture. I'm sure you are now hearing this term of, we are a product-driven company, product culture. We're all product people. Doesn't matter your function, everyone is a product. So how do you actually build that culture? So obviously it starts with the product people, and hopefully the CEO or one of the executives are also product-driven, but how can you make sure that everyone in such a big org really understands that product is at the core of everything and can influence new hires? Because at some point, I guess that you are not going to be the ultimate decision hiring managers for every single person that joins the product team today. So maybe Sam or Patrick, you can touch upon that, but open mic for anyone here. Do you believe in this thing, product culture? What is that?
So I don't really know what product culture means in this case, but I can talk a bit about what we do to ensure that's part of the DNA of the company. So when you join Airbnb, you go through I think it's 3 or 4 day long orientation during which different teams talk about exactly what they do at the company and the value that they add and how to best partner with them. And product management is actually part of that. So there is somebody who presents, and it doesn't matter who is going through orientation. You will learn about what PM does and how to best interact with them, and a little bit more about the org. What happens after orientation, the best way to ensure product thinking throughout the org with people who might not have the title product is a lot of outreach, a lot of awareness building, a lot of partnership. Something I see a lot is that you see PMs becoming a little bit insular, where you spend most of the time with the engineering team and the design team and maybe QA and maybe data science. But there are a lot of other functions with whom product needs to interact, who need to understand what product does. And what I've seen generally work fairly successfully in instilling a product-focused mindset is proactively reaching out to other teams, establishing those relationships, sharing your plans, involving them when appropriate, and being more proactive and social than not.
Definitely. And building on top of what you just said is I think good product managers realize and really embrace the idea that product ideas come from everywhere. And in order to build a great product culture across the entire company, everyone wants to feel like a stakeholder, from a recent grad engineer to the CEO. Everyone wants to feel heard. Everyone wants to feel involved in what they're working towards every day. And so I think that as a PM, the onus is on us and a team to make everyone feel heard, to always be open to ideas, whether it's proactively reaching out, opening, team brainstorms to crowdsource, new creative thinking for the next year, hear what is on people's mind, hosting town halls, being receptive to people who ask you for coffee and say, hey, I have this new idea, I'd love to pitch you. And that's being able to instill that product culture that way by portraying the sense that as a product manager, you are open to everyone's ideas, you are a teammate.
Yeah, just adding on to what you both said, which I agree is kind of the baseline necessities. Call it product culture or something else, but I think at least for the product team at ServiceTitan, one of the things that we want to really stay focused and top of mind is really business outcomes. And one of the things that we're encouraging all of our teammates to do is to start talking around the office. Everything needs to be framed around business outcome. And if that's the way that you kind of get the conversation going with other departments, that's the culture that we care to build. And if you want to call it product culture, great. I mean, we are product folks, so at the end of the day, we exist to kind of like serve those business metrics and business outcomes. So I think that is the way I think about product culture at ServiceTitan. Yeah.
And I agree with you. From a training standpoint, I remember our very first students were software engineers who didn't want to code. And now we have this whole array of not just that, we have business school students, either before or after an MBA. You have attorneys, real estate brokers. Now, I think everyone is embracing the idea of building something good is critical. Without that, you can't just fake it. You can just market crap. And it's fascinating to see how you guys can scale that thought that seems pretty obvious at a startup level because everyone is in the same room to now thousands of people across the world. And that brings me to the next topic, which is distributed work, the future of work. And I was getting some questions from the audience about that. Like, you all have offices in LA, but I'm sure it's not just the team in LA, right? Like, you are looking for talent elsewhere. So how are you now kind of keeping your product strategy or in general your communication consistent as you scale your team outside your HQ?
I can start. We have a fairly geographically distributed development team, and we have an office in Armenia that we just now started. So it's definitely not easy. We do a lot of travel back and forth. The new team members go through our new Titan orientation, and in the Glendale office. We also record all of our main sessions and send them over, as well as someone who came from like an agile background, we had to make some changes to our kind of structure, and for some teams, they kind of work less, they might not communicate, like have daily stand-ups, but they might accommodate each other's time zones at different times. So it's definitely a challenge that we're still kind of working with, but we've been able to adapt and change a lot of our processes to accommodate.
So I might be a bit of an outlier. Part of my team's based in Portland, part in Seattle, and part in San Francisco, and I actually live up in Brentwood, so it's a lot of flying. Some of the things that we found work having a distributed team is, first of all, the expectation that everybody's distributed, and it's a little easier when you have a lot of the team that is distributed versus 95% of the team is here, but then 5% of the team is over there, because then it becomes a little bit more of a function of accommodating others rather than everybody finding themselves in the same situation. Some of the challenges we have, and this is sort of silly, but prior to Airbnb, I worked at Earth's biggest bookstore, and one of the things that worked well there is video conferencing was really good. You just walk in a room and you put in a code, and then you can see someone in the other room. And I've firsthand experienced the challenges of video conferencing not always working. And my hypothesis is that "can you hear me now" has become the new hello. And like, it sounds weird, but that actually is sort of a difference, because when you start getting the latency and you can't really understand each other that well, that's a real thing that becomes an impediment to communication. The other thing is establishing processes which are formed around the fact that everybody's distributed. So an artifact of old school Agile is that you tend to have a daily stand-up, which is exactly what it says it is. Everybody stands up at 10 o'clock and you talk about what you did yesterday, today, and any blockers. And that's a little bit more difficult. And so whatever route you choose, whether this is in Slack, whether people send email updates, whether you choose to not actually have a stand-up, needs to be mindful and considerate of the geographical constraints and the fact that communication might not be as synchronous as you'd like. So rather than sort of crossing your fingers and realizing everybody works far away, let's just try a subset of the way we've operated in the past. It tends to be more successful to adapt your process and find ways which are specifically tailored towards a distributed team.
So we're actually the complete opposite of Airbnb, where we have 95%, I would say, of our team based in LA, and a very small subset of our team in Northern California, in Palo Alto, and now San Francisco. And so it's certainly challenging to have remote teammates both on the product and engineering team. And of course, the world today is evolving, and I'm sure that we will continue to grow in our other offices. But I think for companies that are kind of in that same position where you're first starting to expand geographically, my advice to you would be to embrace it, embrace the people, that one outlier who is kind of remote. And maybe instead of making or considering it as an accommodation that you're making, how can you celebrate it? How can you make it fun? So one example that I love at our company is we have one of those little video camera robots that someone in our Palo Alto office can remote control to move it around. It's fun, and we've actually decorated it in a jacket and sunglasses. And so it's fun, so whenever Joe wants to come and talk to us, even though he's in Palo Alto, it kind of makes it this fun experience that we can celebrate, rather than be, oh man, we forgot, we have to call Joe in. And so I think that that's a fun way that you can successfully operate, and it makes it easier to scale the business, as well as make your team feel more connected and collaborative.
Quick plug for Julia's team again, Product Ops. I think maybe there's an analogy with McDonald's here, where you go anywhere in the world and you can expect consistency, whether you like it or not. It's pretty consistent, right? Same thing with like remote offices. What we really want to encourage is, again, flying folks here, go through NTO or orientation. The whole purpose is just to ensure that no matter which office you're working out of, it feels familiar to you. And again, Julia's charter, one of her many objectives is to kind of bring that normalization to us, because we've been growing very rapidly with teams. Kind of rogue is too strong of a word, but definitely like variations in how we even like go through the rituals of Agile. This is something that we hope to standardize and bring that consistency across the board.
Well, thank you. And just to wrap this up, this is the last question, and I would like to ask you, you're all product leaders. You are all successful in fast-growing companies. And that's cream of the crop, in a way. And joining a fast-growing company as a PM is already a huge achievement. But in reality, there is no guarantee that you are going to be growing at the same pace as the company that you just joined, right? It's not luck. You also have to be good at something, and you probably have to evolve, because a PM at a 100-people company is very different than director of product at a 1,000-people company. So based on your own experience, this is not just free advice for the world, just based on your experience, what do you think that you did that was so good to help you adjust? So when you joined a company at the size that you were, to kind of let you continue being at that company, growing as a leader? Maybe Ed?
Yeah, I think one of the key things is to build up your discovery muscle, because I go back to something I said earlier. I was fortunate enough to start at a company as the first product manager, but product market fit was already found. And in those cases, you kind of just execute, and you never really build up that discovery muscle. One of the things that I feel like is really important and that folks who continue in a career eventually practices and experiences enough is really building that part out. Because again, as you're starting out, you're scrappy, you're just trying to like do whatever it takes to make that big deal happy. But there comes a point when you got to be smart about what you're doing, and that's where kind of I feel like ServiceTitan was at about a year ago now, where the surface area was so big, we had to be very smart about what to do next. And a lot of that, you have to have good discovery muscles to be able to be effective. So if I were to think about like the folks that I was fortunate enough to work with over the years and the ones who really stood out, they were always the ones who learned fastest. What we do is actually not very, it's difficult, but the process, the approach is very proven. You just got to learn as fast as humanly possible. And that's what product operations, we hope, will help us, is like, as we go through this phase, we need to keep learning as quickly as possible because the obvious is going away. What was obvious was 5 years ago. 5 years later, nothing is obvious, and every penalty is a little bit more acute. So I think that's what I've seen in my career.
What I would say for any product manager at any stage in their career is completely getting rid of the phrase from your vocabulary, "That's not my job." Everything is your job. And to be successful at any stage of a company, at any level of your career, it is your job as the PM to get done whatever task needs to get done. It could be wireframing, it could be making coffee, it could be cleaning up the backlog, whatever it is that you could, negotiating contracts, like whatever it is that you could possibly imagine, it is your job. And whatever stage of your company that you're in, I think that's really the key to driving success.
So something I found works well, and I've been doing product for a very, very long time, back when people used to use Friendster and they still sent out those AOL CDs, the coasters, is the fallacy you fall into is if you've been doing product for a long time, you sort of assume, well, I've been doing it forever and I know how this works. And the problem with that is that this is a pretty quickly growing function, and that's not the case. So a really good way for anyone experienced to get humbled is actually to take a look at the product school curriculum. And if you think you know what's going on, you take a look at that and you realize, oh, maybe I don't. And so to piggyback on what you said, I think what's actually even more effective is not just to never stop learning, but to proactively learn, because there are skills that you think you might not need in your job right now, and you might think that you don't need a good grasp of financial modeling, and you might think you don't need to write SQL or wireframe or learn how Figma works or whatever. And the speed at which this job changes and the way in which the job differs from company to company suggests that those who do best are those who will adapt the fastest and learn proactively. In terms of staying relevant and ensuring that we have a high bar of adaptable PMs within our company, something that we found is explicitly looking for the trait of a desire to learn in our hiring process, and curiosity and hunger and adaptability. So I like what you said, lose the words, "it's not my job," from the vocabulary. And there actually are ways to interview for that type of thing. And we found it works pretty well to ensure that hires are comfortable in various different roles, including ones that they have not had in the past.
Yeah, for me, I'm not a product manager or product person. I'm an operations person. So I view the world through the lens of we're here building software, just like a factory is building widgets. And we have to do it quickly and efficiently before our competitors can build more and better. So it's looking at like what is our strategic resource pool, are people producing the software, which is like the product managers and the engineers. How can we make sure that they're focused on the right things, that they're like not wasting time kind of redoing work or coming up to bottlenecks, or like duplicating efforts with each other, or creating designs where we have a UX team, or doing things that aren't going to add value towards us moving fast. And then also just keeping track of costs. That's an important part. If you're growing quickly, you might be focused on customer acquisition, but you're not actually thinking of like how much it's going to cost within your own company. And all of that requires some thinking to make sure that you're efficient, fast, and kind of not redundant. So that's my thing.
Well, first of all, thank you so much. Let's give it up for your review.